Great. So the title of my talk today is Why You Should Be Using Social Media in Medicine. So to give you a little perspective on the users in social media around the world, if we have a population of 7.6 billion people in the world right now, 3 billion people actually use social media, which is a phenomenal thing to think about. And of these people, most of them are using social media on their cell phones. So we're really the social media generation. It's really the time to get involved. So if you're not involved, I hope to convince you in this session why you should be using social media. This is a Pew Research Center survey from January 2008, and asked the question, how often are people using social media? It was phenomenal and incredibly interesting to me that 74% of people reported that they use Facebook daily. About 50% of people use Twitter daily as well. And so this is an amazing thing to see, that not only are people using social media, more than 3 billion people, but they're using it almost every single day. Well, what about in the medical profession, in our world, how often are people using it? So this was a survey of medical students, and I think this is a particularly relevant group to look at as these are the future of the doctors and the practitioners that will be caring for us. And the question was simply, are you using social media? 94% of people, medical students, about 500 of them, in 2014 said they were using it. And 90% of these medical students are using social media for the purposes of professional education and use. And so this was done 4 years ago. I'd imagine this figure is even higher at this point in time. Now, what do medical professionals prefer in terms of their platform for social media? We'll hear a lot of different ideas on what types of social media platforms to potentially use, whether it's Facebook or Twitter or blogs. We'll hear that in the next talk. But most of the people from a medical standpoint tend to prefer Twitter as their means for social media. There's a lot of benefits for social media as well, and I'll go into some of these benefits. Obviously, you can stay up to date in your professional field. You can join the conversation at national meetings like this. There's also other ongoing meetings like TBT where you can stay connected to those meetings by having a presence on social media. And you can actually continue the conversation afterwards. So when there's new ideas presented, there's new research that comes out, you can have discussions with it online. It's like a large online virtual journal club in many ways. You can engage with other echocardiographers, cardiologists, sonographers, particularly for ASE. And then, as I mentioned before, you can share and discuss new and interesting ideas, research, and even cases. So I think this is particularly relevant in the 21st century as we think about how we learn and how we absorb medical information. Well, we know that there are tons of resources available, and so it's like a fire hydrant of resources that we can get information from. There's JACE, there's Circulation, there's JACC, there's a variety of other cardiology journals. So we should really be able to have the most up-to-date information at our fingertips. The reality of the situation is different, however. We've all seen figures like this before. We're trying to drink from this fire hose, and we only get a few drops in here or there. It's absolutely impossible to keep up with what's going on in the medical world. You probably all have email fatigue. You're getting tons and tons of emails every day from all the journals you subscribe to. Maybe you read the table of contents, maybe you look at a figure, but very rarely do you deep delve into the texts of the actual articles that are being published. So one real benefit of using social media is to stay up to date. Almost every major medical journal at this time uses social media to share their content. And what I'm noticing now is that a lot of content is being published ahead of time on social media before it makes it online on the website, and certainly before it makes it to press. And so if you're on social media, you'll have a first-hand exposure to a lot of the content that's coming out. Examples of this are the ACC hypertension guidelines. I was part of the committee and the task force that put this out into social media. So we released these guidelines online via Twitter before we published them online. The Chagas disease guidelines as well on ASE were tweeted out simultaneously as the publications. And then also when there's controversy regarding guidelines, there's a huge controversy over the new stroke guidelines that were released this year when AHA quietly rescinded a portion of their guideline. And so this was picked up not by articles or commentaries, but by social media, and then it caused a whole Twitter storm afterwards. You can actually as I mentioned earlier, virtually attend conferences around the world using things like hashtags. And so here for ASE this year, the hashtag is ASE 2018, but every major medical conference has a hashtag. And so if you download Twitter, you're able to go online and search this hashtag, or you can do it from your tablet or your actual computer or laptop as well, and you can see what's being talked about at various sessions. And things that are interesting, things that tend to generate controversy are the things that end up getting talked about. So I was at ACC this year and I saw a talk on the RV and the tricuspid valve. At the same time, however, there was a talk on the aorta and its effects on mitral regurgitation that I wanted to go to. And a lot of people were talking about it. So I went online. On the right side, you can see the tweet from that talk, and on the left side, there was the talk that I was actually sitting in. And even our colleague, Dr. Mackinson from Seattle, who wasn't able to join us yesterday because he was at a conference, was tweeting about his experience at that conference and will be joining us today. So it's interesting to see how conferences can kind of interconnect through Twitter. Now, it's really important for using Twitter and social media for modern day education. As I mentioned earlier, it's impossible to read texts, it's impossible to read many journal articles, but you can get snapshots of what's important by looking online on Twitter. This is an image that was produced by Dr. Arihoa, and it talks about the cardiac findings in sarcoidosis, and it's a really phenomenal graphic. Graphics like these come up on Twitter all the time. It's very easy to search hashtags or disease states and actually find these particular topics or learning points, as I like to call them, on Twitter. And then you also can share cases as well. So this is an interesting case from Dr. Ahmed, who talks about a patient with severe mitral regurgitation. You can see a prosthetic valve that's completely dehisced, or at least part of it's completely dehisced, which is the mechanism for the mitral regurgitation. Really cool cases like this, which you really can't see otherwise, or you might see once or twice a year, you can actually see on Twitter. And then it actually can generate discussion as well. And so this is just a thread that I took a video of someone who posted pictures of patient with Chiesi-Mack, and there are various echo clips that are being shown, and then the question was, what's the diagnosis, what do you do with this? And then the person continued to post more pictures from the histology, the pathology, and then links about what you do in patients with Chiesi-Mack. Do you resect this? Do you operate? Do you not? So on and so forth. So it really can be used for modern day education. What it has not been done is studied a lot. So Twitter, Facebook, and so on and so forth, not a lot of data out there. We looked at a very small study when I was a medicine resident, and we developed a Twitter handle and profile for our medicine residency program. And we simply asked people, did this benefit your education in any way whatsoever? And 2/3 to 3/4 of people said that it helped them remember teaching points, it helped them felt connected to the conferences if they were on night call or if they were off that particular day. And so we know that it helps foster community, but it also potentially can help with education as well. What is interesting is that there are some signals now and some research that's coming out that might suggest that Twitter and social media might change clinical practice. This was a study that was done of about 300 practitioners in multiple countries around the world, and they delivered evidence-based practice points via social media platforms for hypertension, for exercise, for nutrition to these practitioners. And they simply conducted a survey afterwards to see if it changed their practice. And in fact, 70% of the respondents indicated that the education they received via social media had changed the way they practiced or intended to practice, and 70% of these people also indicated that the education they received would help with further research in their clinical practice. Now, your voice is actually heard on social media. This is a snapshot from last year's AAC conference where there were 5,000 tweets that were sent out during the time of the conference. That generated 9.5 million impressions. An impression is a time or an instance in which somebody sees what's being published or put out there. So if someone has multiple followers, several thousand followers, and they put something out, then the potential for that particular message or tweet to reach that audience is tremendous. 9.5 million people saw the tweets from AAC last year. Let's see what happens this year. And how does this happen? I mentioned a little bit about this. Well, if I share a tweet, it goes to my network of 2,000 people, and if someone then shares it on their end, it goes to their network of 1,000 people or 500 people, and it spreads kind of like wildfire. One thing that's really important to realize is you don't have to be involved in the creation of content for social media. You can absolutely be a spectator. So this is a pyramid of social media engagement. So if you are on the bottom of the pyramid where most people lie, it's completely fine. All you have to do is follow the conversation, see what's going on, read what's going on. It will help you in terms of your education, your clinical practice, and keep you up to date. And then if you get more ambitious over time and you want to spend more time with this, you can climb up the pyramid and become a creator. People who put content out or are original. I'll talk about some instances going forward of that. You can brand yourself with Twitter and so on and so forth. So while there's not a lot of research being done on Twitter and social media, a lot of people are talking about it. This is Dr. Ye, who mentioned that there's 3 benefits of cardio Twitter or Twitter for medicine. It's democratization of voices, and I think this is particularly important. You know, I'm a graduating fellow. When I was in my first year of fellowship, I was very shy. I wouldn't go up to people in this room and ask questions because I wasn't sure if I would be able to talk to them or if I would feel nervous speaking to them. On Twitter, it kind of evens the playing field to some degree. You can ask questions no matter how basic or advanced, and likely you'll get an answer from people. It's also really good for crowdsourced peer review. So if you have an idea, not necessarily a research idea, but if you have an interesting case and you want a thought on how to manage people, manage a particular case, and you have images that are associated with that, a lot of people are putting this information out on Twitter, and you'll get a lot of feedback on how to manage patients or cases. Of course, with any sort of social media platform, there's debate, dissent, and community building that can take place, particularly debate and dissent. I won't spend too much time on this, but you all have heard of Orbit trial and Cabana trial. Well, this generated a Twitter storm or firestorm of information where people were accusing each other of backstabbing and so on and so forth. And here are some tweets sent out during the backlash of these two trials. But nonetheless, it can be used in a professional way and should be used in a professional way. Interestingly, I'm starting to see it used a little bit in academic productivity, maybe not promotion yet. I'm going to mention my mentor here for a second, Dr. Lang. If I look at his Google Scholar profile online, he has 50,000 citations, almost 50,000 citations. If I look at mine, I have less than 1% of that, 0.1% of that, in fact. And so I wouldn't want to show my Google Scholar page to anybody. But what people are starting to use now is something called Altmetric, which is a novel way to look at the impact of research. So Altmetric is a system that tracks the attention of research by three main sources. One is social media, so Twitter, Facebook, if people share your research or link to the article. Traditional media, which is the New York Times, lay press, and then also online reference managers like PubMed and Mendeley and Site Like Us. And so it kind of combines this and puts this information out as to how impactful your research is. So I'm not going to show my Google Scholar profile, but I will show this. This is a paper that I wrote that generated a lot of attention and Twitter, and so it did quite well. Some people are actually putting this in their CV. So this particular person actually mentioned that this was the highest altmetric of any paper produced or published in the Marine Mammal Science Journal, which is not in our field, but you get the idea. You can use Twitter for branding as well. If you have a program, a clinical program like hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, a complex ablation program, a heart failure program, people are actually using Twitter to sell themselves. We're in a consumer-driven environment. Patients are going online to find out who to go to as their doctors, as their treatment providers, and this is one way to get the message across. But you can also have fun with this. This is something that Dr. Lang has created over the past year. I'm sure all of you have seen the Naughty Fellow hashtag, which does a play on 3D echo and does human simulations of a variety of disease states. And so interestingly, this started out as a lot of fun just to put these videos out here that were created a number of years ago. But it actually turned into something more educational where we put links to review articles. We put down images from echo, from MRI. And so it ends up being quite fun to actually look at Twitter in another way that's a little bit more interesting as well. So to finish up in the last couple slides, there's a lot of reasons to use social media. You can use it to connect to people, to engage, to inform, to reflect, to share, to be challenged, to be supported, to lead, to learn, and also to inspire. For me, I use it because I avoid writing. Sorry, Dr. Lang. I use it to legitimize web surfing time, and I also use it to procrastinate. But if you haven't been convinced yet to use social media, this is why. All of our presidents in the past 10 years for ASE have a presence on Twitter. But still, if you're not convinced, our actual presidents and past presidents are on Twitter. In fact, they tweeted about this meeting. Make Echo great again, and yes, Echo can. ASE 2018. Thank you.